Hello, thanks for watching this presentation. I'm Shi from the fourth year of the MNGAD course. The topic I want to share with you today is called the Restraint and Respect in Aid, while reflecting the cases in the rural revitalization strategy of China. As my knowledge and experiences are mainly from the architecture field, and I found the design process is to some extent similar to the aid process, I'll put those two in comparison and will be sharing some of the cases and my thoughts from a designer's point of view, and I hope I can convey my point clear enough and you can find some inspirations from my sharing. The presentation has 5 main sections followed by the references. First, I'll briefly introduce the background of the rural revitalization in China. Then I'll compare it to the international aid and discuss the similarities and differences between the two. After that, I'll show some cases in rural revitalization, mainly the retrofit of the villages, and then discuss what could be learned from those practical cases. And finally, I relate the findings back to international aid to suggest how could the aid get inspired from the lessons learned in the rural revitalization practices. So the first section is Introduction to China's Rural Revitalization. The rural revitalization strategy was proposed as a key move for the development of a modernized economy at the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China in 2017. China released a package of policies in 2018, charting the roadmap for rural revitalization. The timetable required that by 2035, all Chinese people, whether in cities or rural areas, will have equal access to basic public services. And finally, by 2050, rural areas should have robust agriculture, beautiful landscapes, and prosperous farmers. To achieve the goals, the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs had vowed to focus on 4 key tasks. Firstly, the country will improve its supplies of grain and other important agricultural products, mainly focusing on the seed industry and arable land. Second, the rural industries will be improved, such as agricultural products processing industry, to create more jobs in rural regions. Third, water supply, logistics, the power grid and transport infrastructure will be upgraded, and rural public education, hospitals, and cultural services will be enhanced. And finally, the fourth task is boosting rural governance. As a part of the big strategy, the Green Rural Revival Program in Zhejiang, which is the province I'm from, has won the UN Environment Program Champion of the Earth Award in 2018. The program aimed to incorporate water management, waste management, and recycling to transform the province. Today, 97% of villages in Zhejiang have transformed their polluted waterways into clean, drinkable rivers, benefiting 30 million residents. Waterways have been cleaned, with riverbanks blooming into scenic spots. The essence of the strategy could be summarized by the quotes from President Xi, who was the secretary of the Zhejiang Provincial Party Committee at the time. He said that we do not promote economic development at the expense of environment. The slogan that's known by nearly everyone in China is called "Clean waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets," which is then further rephrased as "Green is gold." Another very important sub-strategy is called the beautiful countryside construction, which is directly related to the design and building industry, and therefore is more of architecture designers' interests. It is proposed as a key part of the beautiful China construction. In the background of a rapid urbanization, industrialization, and rural transformative development, beautiful countryside construction has a vital practical significance for renovating hollow villages, improving rural living environments, reconstructing rural spaces, narrowing rural-urban income gap, as well as promoting rural-urban integrated development. The most common form of transferring the villages is introducing tourism to stimulate the economy, and the part that designers are most directly involved in is the transformation, renovation, and reconstruction of the original buildings and infrastructures to accommodate the needs brought by the changes, for example, for homestay and B&B, etc. The second part is the similarities and differences between rural revitalization and international aid. First, both of them are aid actions from a more developed section to a less developed one, to somehow make the latter moving more towards the former. They both involve the process of introducing new lifestyles and cultures to the receivers. and also physically, they both refurbish and reconstruct on top of the existing structures. Additionally, like the international aid, rural revitalization can also be both governmental and from NGOs. When we focus in the specific context of retrofit of buildings, the relationship between designers and occupants or users can be compared to the benefactors and beneficiaries in the context of international aid, while the relation of the roles are quite similar. When it comes to the differences, the most obvious one is that the rural revitalization is within the same country. In this case, it's China, and therefore there are relatively less cultural differences between the benefactors and beneficiaries. Also, compared to the complexity of different motivations involved in the international aid, the driver of rural revitalization is relatively simpler and more altruistic, while it is more focused on the development itself. And in this way, some problems would be more focused, and there will be less barriers when applying the actions due to the political system. It can be considered as a relatively ideal environment for aid actions. Consequently, the rural revitalization has a relatively shorter feedback loop, as response is quicker, so it can be seen as a scaled-down and quicker version of international scaled aid actions. And with the core of both actions being similar, analysis on the rural revitalization could also be valuable as a reference for making improvements in international aid. In the third part, I'll show some practical cases in rural revitalization, include those projects I'm familiar with and those I've actually participated in. The first I want to show is the refurbishment of an old house in a valley called Nanluo Guxiang in Beijing by the famous architect Shuhei Aoyama and his Blue Architecture Studio. The very small house is the home of 3 generations, 5 people. With a very limited space, the designer wanted to maintain the intimacy in the family while creating individual spaces for every member at the same time. The architect was great. He came up with an excellent design which fulfilled every single requirement raised by the client. And this series of pictures shows the before and after of the building, and also the post-after situation when the architect went back to revisit the house 1 year after the retrofit. It basically slips back to the before situation. This project is quite popular within architects, and there have been a lot of discussions on the internet about what went wrong and who to blame. Whose voice should be prioritized? Are we standing on a high ground with assumptions of which lifestyle is more advanced when we comment on the case? The next story is called the story of the 3 pots in a village in Guangdong, where they have a very special Kejia culture. It is a typical kitchen in the village, and these are the 3 pots. They are very important in Kejia people's kitchen, represents different functions during different time. The largest pot is for boiling water for bath. The middle one is used when there are guests and during festivals, and the smallest one is for daily use. In Kejia culture, the 3 pots have another layer of meanings. The big pot represents the longevity of the elders in the family. The middle pot represents the career of the middle-aged people, and the smallest represents the future of the children. The 3 pots always sit there like a faith of them. The original village is now hollowed because the government has built a new set of buildings next to the village. The villagers left the old village and moved into the square concrete boxes. When we go inside the new buildings, in the picture it is showing the kitchen. The left side is the gas stove provided by the designer, and the side by the window are the 3 pots built by the residents. And because the villagers are mostly old people in their 70s and 80s, they often forgot to turn off the gas stove, which is not very safe. So they finally built this version of kitchen with the 3 pots, and they went back to the old village to collect the firewood. They've totally changed the internal space from what was provided by the designers. They kept chicken in the shower and raised pigs in the living room. This makes us think if designers knew a little bit more about their lifestyles, would the situation be different? The next one is a project I participated in last year during my gap year, Qingshan Village in Hangzhou. The approach they took was relatively more artistic. The previous culture auditorium was transferred into a design library, and the previously abandoned school was rebuilt as a nature school. The school provides a lot of nature-related activities, attracts a lot of families to come here for weekends and vacations. They also found the old villagers who are craftsmen to talk about handicraft and produce art products. Other facilities are also constructed, attracted many people from the city to spend their spare time. And also there are many artists came to live in the village as new villagers. The project I'm involved was to come up with a strategy to accommodate the growth in population due to tourism and new people moving in. We did a long period immersive research to find out villagers' needs. We stayed and lived together with the villagers to understand their daily life. We used this card game to communicate with the villagers and let them express their needs in an easier way. We provide a map of the village with photos of current states of every corners and let the villagers to choose the background card and put item cards into the background to visualize their prospect of how the spaces could be improved. The participants include both original residents and new residents. We then came up with proposals of how to improve the existing infrastructure and communal spaces to promote the communication and interaction between the old and new villages, and also design some strategies to make use of the spare rooms in the existing houses to accommodate new villages. In my opinion, this process was very carefully considered and the results are applaudable. But when I then carried the investigation further, I realized most of the old villagers doesn't want this interaction with newcomers in the first place, despite that it has been the core of our design brief. And the reason it wasn't found initially was that the people we talk to and live with are inherently only those that are willing to interact. So there is an inherent bias, but we still need to consider everyone's needs. The last case is the Xiaoshi village in Sichuan. The leaders of the village initially wanted to redesign the whole village to develop tourism and homestay, but the architects thought the process should start with improving the villagers' life instead of taking spaces from their homes, to let them gradually understand how the development and tourism will benefit their lives. So the designer started with a spacious communal space with a big roof. After it was done, the villagers started together to use the space for different group activities and start to treat it as an icon. Their self-introduction started to become, "I'm from the village with the big roof." The cohesion and identity are gradually formed. The second step is to transfer the existing residential buildings. The picture is showing the new village built next to the old village after the great earthquake in Sichuan. Since then, the most urgent need of the village is outdoor spaces for people to gather and do different activities. The designer only did one thing, extended the eaves of the old houses. So people started to walk out from their houses to chat and play under the eaves by the streets. The village became more and more vibrant. They also built a new communal barn for similar reasons. And the final step is back to the tourism and homestay. The designer added extensions to existing houses to add these functions. The villagers became stakeholders of the homestay operation. With the previous process of constructing the sense of belonging and pride of the villagers are now more open to tourism and feel less offended when tourism kicks in as a new format in their lives. Instead, they're very proud of the changes and very satisfied with the additional income brought by tourism, which is the goal of rural revitalization, richer and better life. By reflecting on the cases, we can obtain some suggestions for better development strategies. First is to fully understand the user's needs without prejudices and presettings. And the second is to intervene with restraint and respect, introduce the least amount of additives, and let it grow organically with the specific lifestyle of the target place. And the third one is to start from improving people's awareness, let them understand The aid is aiming to help them and will not exploit them. And the last one is to constantly evaluate the outcomes and continue to improve further actions. Those suggestions can be further projected to inspire international aid. The two processes are clearly facing many problems in common. The right-hand side shows people in rural areas holding portable urinals in alleys, while the right shows a water well in Africa. A French architect went there, felt sorry for the women there that had to carry water every day, and proposed that water tap could be installed to every individual house there. What he didn't expect is that the women there then start to protest against the proposal, because what he didn't see is that the process of getting water and gather around the well is a way of communication among women. The process of emptying the urinals in the left picture carries the same significance. But actually, when we think one step further, we will then realize to fulfill this need, it does not have to be in the form of talking with portable urinals in hands or gathering around a well. It only indicates that there is a need for a space for communication. Here are some inspirations I thought could be brought to the context of international aid, corresponding to the findings in the rural revitalization. First is to respect every culture without imposing aesthetics and value, and fully understand that cultures shouldn't have superiorities. The second is to clarify the motivation and make decisions with restraint and respect, and carefully delineate the border from cultural invasion and colonization. Third is the same as in the rural revitalization. The first step should always be making people aware of the benefits from the aid, to make them accept what's being given to them and prevent slippage. And the last one is to communicate equally, try to understand the limitations and bias in communications, and try to mitigate the effects. At the end, I want to share this paragraph from Muji's website. What is Muji? Muji's goal is to give customers a rational satisfaction, expressed not with "this is what I really want," but with "this will do." "This is what I really want" expresses both feigned egoism and discord, while "this will do" expresses conciliatory reasoning. In fact, it may even incorporate resignation and a little dissatisfaction. Muji's goal is to sweep away that slight dissatisfaction and raise the level of the response. This will do to one filled with clarity and confidence. I think this idea of "this will do" is also crucial in aid, while the rest of the freedom should be given to the users to define their own lifestyles. And I'll end my presentation with this quote from B.V. Doshi: "Life celebrates when lifestyle and architecture fuse." And this lifestyle is clearly not imposed by the designers, but it is inherently embodied in the users. These are my references, and thanks again for listening.